I've heard that this kind of work is a so-called female work, and I understood that it's meant on the on an energetic level, but I don't understand it. I really try to understand what it means, because I'm wondering why this term of female or male energy is used instead of just saying like forcing energy or taking energy or something like this. So I'm really interested in understanding what it's mean.
I hear you. Well, of course, it's a limitation of the language, and you probably meant feminine, not female, feminine, and masculine. Yes. And because feminine and masculine are in relation to the principle, which both genders embody, and female and male in relation to the gender. So I hope that's clear to everyone, right? So this is this, what you speak of, and what you bring out to the open, invites, if you will, not just a straightforward answer, although the answer to why this path is considered to be feminine, or the path of the divine feminine, even more accurately put. And I understand your question also, why is it called feminine, and why something could be called masculine? Why not to just give it a more kind of abstract, right? Abstract terms. It's an interesting one, so please just relax, but be attuned. On one hand, I totally agree with you. And it's a lot of biases there. Today, the feminine path to self-realization, or the path of divine feminine, is on the rise, and it has been on the rise for the last few years, and I've witnessed that firsthand. I would tell you, in the last 5 years, we hear more about it, more and more about it, to the degree that it's already out there through the conferences, through the language of the presenters, and it's being widely used. You can see it in the magazines, and it's becoming a bit of a slogan even. Why is it called feminine or divine feminine? Because it is spoken in relation, perhaps, and in contrast to another path, which is also rightfully very often referred to as masculine. The feminine path here is the path of energetic transformation. It's literally the path of transformation. Transformation, transmutation. It's the path of alchemical transmutation of basic elements into pure gold. The difference here only is that we don't work on trying to create some piece of matter, right? But it's in relation to the transformation of our consciousness.
So it's related to the ability of women to give birth and to...
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, okay.
It's very much related to the ability of women to give birth to everything. It relates also to a supremacy of a female organism, because female organism is more superior. Superior not in... this could be very easily misunderstood. It is superior in a sense that it is more equipped to hold more prana. Tantra speaks about it in unapologetic terms. Female organism is more wired even for this work. And it is interesting that historically, perhaps because of that, or we could speculate there may be many other reasons, women were not allowed into the work of spiritual transformation. And we know that to be a matter of fact. Many spiritual traditions denied access for women into this work. Not this work, but into, just look across the cultures. I'm not talking about witch hunt, though it belongs to that as well. I'm not talking about the attitude of retarded societal norms towards the suppression. It's obviously the perils of living in the age of darkness, the perils living in the Kali Yuga. It's the perils living in the age when darkness reigns. It is also interesting that historically the feminine path was replaced with the organized, institutionalized religions. It was replaced with institutions who installed very different methodologies and very different principles. But it is not true to say that feminine path ceased to exist. It went underground. I would even suggest that it went underground in those traditions where it no longer existed at a surface level, but it must have existed deep down, otherwise it will not produce the mystics of its culture. So this is, if you will, part answer to the why is it called feminine, divine feminine. And you raised also this why is it feminine versus masculine. Well, it's an interesting one. Again, if we are to utilize the analogy which Tantra works with continuously, then the principle of Shiva Shakti, of what is exemplified by this, pure categories. These are categories of awareness. Shiva and Shakti obviously belongs to the language, so it stands for the category, though Shiva transcends it all. And Shakti is a dynamic force of that transcendence. They are one and inseparable. And yet, something is born out of that union. And out of that union, born that relationship. Therefore, though Shiva and Shakti are one, they are also two. And that two immediately presupposes relation. Immediately presupposes the aspect of dynamic, creative tension. And that dynamic, creative tension is translated into the entire creation throughout all its levels and phases. The Shiva principle has that verticality that is represented by the lingam. And the Shakti principle represented by the valley-like horizontality of these feminine qualities that Shakti represents as energy. Energy constantly flows. Energy constantly mutates, permutates, changes. You've heard that, all of you, the scientific paradigm that you cannot destroy energy. In other words, it's one of the amazing things for every spiritual aspirant to learn, that even scientifically speaking, there is no possibility to get rid of something, because that's what destroying often represents, right? Energy is indestructible. So in other words, we cannot just chuck something out what we don't like. We don't like something about ourselves, the first thing we need to learn, it's impossible. It has to be transformed. It cannot be gotten rid of. There's no flash somewhere down to whatever. So this is the main principle. You see, the transformation here is what the chief property of Shakti. So that masculine and feminine, already represented by these two pure categories of the Shiva and Shakti, what Shiva and Shakti stand for. And everything in creation is that, if you will, union of Shiva and Shakti. Everything. Just as the fabric is made of the horizontal and vertical threads, the thread of Shiva and the thread of Shakti, and you cannot separate them. You cannot separate, that's the fabric of awareness. That fabric of awareness, it's the bliss released out of that union. It's the enormity of that joy, it's that rapture that is released of that profound union. That fabric that is woven out of the union of Shiva and Shakti takes place everywhere. It's the fabric of existence. It is that what being consciousness bliss represents. You see? So feminine and masculine here not to be only in relation to the gender. Obviously, when it's only in relation to the gender, we go into that level of concession. We're kind of overlooking or overseeing the inherent, if you will, mystery of life. But even then, if we look into that, then every mundane, so to speak, worldly situation is that very much what represents here the relationship between Shiva and Shakti. You see? Therefore, these ancient myths, this what the lore of many cultures made of, is very telling. There's a lot to learn, a lot of things that we can still distill and bring, and it brings this beauty and relevance into our daily life. For example, the relationship between Shiva and Shakti undergoes various kind of modes of expression if we are just to be entertained by the mythology. They argue just like, husband and wife. The Shiva gets pissed off and Shakti gets pissed off even more. And then Shiva is like really in trouble. He is one and the only, and he can transcend and annihilate the universe. But if she is really angry, then I'm really in trouble. That's the beauty of mythology. You see, the ancient Indian myths are here unapologetic about this. Tantric myths, like that sacred lore. Think about it now. I'm going to give you another example, so you don't think that no, it's not just. It's really amazing. Every tantric scripture has this component, main component. Every tantric scripture is a dialogue of Shiva and Shakti, given. There's no scripture in Tantra which is not a dialogue of Shiva and Shakti. It's the dialogue where Shakti approaches her beloved and presses questions on behalf of the entire humanity, on behalf of the entire creation. And she, of course, seduces Shiva. We don't know what exactly happened. Don't start don't get me wrong. It's not our business what they do, right? How does she do it? How she goes about it? She's a woman, beautiful. She's a one and primordial one. And then, of course, when Shiva is in that relaxed state, right, and kind of just, then she just comes up and starts asking all these secrets. And of course, he's then, he's satisfied and melted, and what can he hold from Shakti? He starts disclosing them all. That's what Tantra is about. Remove that element, it's no longer Tantra. You see? Why couldn't that be just a scripture? I'm sorry, we have enough of other scriptures which are boring to read, sorry. But this is really, really, really the very leitmotif of every tantric scripture. It's the dialogue of Shiva and Shakti. The dialogue, where the questions are persistently pressed and awareness responds to these questions, and that what forms these sutras, that what forms these slokas, that what forms this, what will then become the body of scriptures, the so-called shrutis. In Sanskrit term, it's that what is being heard, because all scriptures are being perceived, received, downloaded. So this is my long response to your question why this path is called Path of Divine Feminine, and my invitation for you to see, you've asked why is it feminine versus masculine, why can't we call it anything else? Why not? It's very helpful. Very helpful. Also, what's very helpful here is a reminder that both genders equally embody masculine and feminine principles. And disbalance of this leads to disbalances, psychological disbalances. So even this is where we can look into and learn a lot about state of cultures, about the state of our civilization as human beings, in terms of how sometimes the certain kind of leaning, how culture becomes overly masculinized, overly militant, and at other times when it, becomes more feminine qualities oriented, you see? And we can draw some conclusions, but the balance is needed there, and that balance is needed at the individual, so to speak, level, at the collective level as well. At the collective level, because one influences the other. That's how it works. It's the matrix. And that matrix also, it's like a hologram, holographic relation. Have you heard of fractals? Fractals. Can you translate that into German for me?
Wie immer weiter ad infinitum verschachtelte Dinge. Fragmente.
Okay, yeah.
So this is like proved by this phenomenon of fractals, that everything is reflection of something else, and you cannot reduce it. It's ad infinitum. So the structure of a small, let's say, molecule of water, and how this will form together into some other molecules, forming certain pattern, will be then observed in cultures, if you will, or can be observed. It can be observed in formation of our thoughts, it can be observed in formation of galaxies. In other words, the small and the big here exhibit the same patterns of sacred geometry. So much for feminine, masculine. Is that clear for you?
Yeah, I think I was just wondering, because I feel that the range between men and women is so big. There are so many possibilities to be a man or a woman, and then you have this border between, but then there are also people right on this border with both. So at some point it's really I feel like it's a question, what's a woman or a man? I mean, there's a difference, of course, but at some point even if women are able to give birth, and this is very special, I don't know, I feel that I cannot really grab what makes it like, what's the difference. It is something but I feel it's nothing you can say it's this. For example, I have two girls and one boy, and for me it's really interesting how different they are. But what I see is that it's very normal that people say, oh, this behavior is it's natural for a boy, this is typical like a boy, or this is typical like a, oh, this is why it's a girl. And I'm really pissed off of this, because I feel that
yes, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you're speaking about now the accepted norms and the psychology of behavior and the psychology of how people, it's a propensity and it's a tendency to generalize. It's a tendency to generalize, but if you're asking me this in relation to yourself, in relation to your own work, I want you to draw your attention to what is primal, important here. And I would like you to also be aware of the distinction. There is a distinction. But before we speak of the distinction, of course, man or woman, female or male body, it's nothing other than consciousness. This gender is just this temporal manifestation. Temporal manifestation. The consciousness has this form. Of course, there's a reason. I don't share the perspective that this has no reason, all this is just an accident, illusion, dream, and has no purpose. Purposeless. No, I don't buy this. But what I'd like to draw your attention to is that female body, the way female body is more delicate already for a given, and there's nothing to argue about it. Body here spoken in totality. We could say the nervous system of a woman is more delicate. And because of that, it is the woman who absorbs the stress. It is the woman. It is the woman who hold this. While men fight, it is the women who hold the stress through their bodies. It is a very well known. Every culture deep down knew that. How it turns and turns, it happened, it's another story. But I want to give you, in this response, something so that you can understand, if you will, from that so-called, dare I say, more refined perspective. At the surface level, I totally agree with you. There are more masculine women and there are more feminine men. Some women contain more masculine energy in them than some... I'm getting lost. Some women contain more masculine energy in them than men, right? And some men appear, at least at the surface value or the surface level of affair, more feminine, right, than some women. So what do we, draw out of this? Yeah, of course we can write fantastic novels and make movies out of it. It's fun, right? And I'm interested in something which beneath of that. Beneath of that is something else. That what belongs to this gathering. And the female organism is more refined. It's a matter of fact. More refined. Tantra is unique. Unique in terms of its applications, but it's also, and perhaps above all else, unique in terms of the knowledge that it retains within the body of its expositions. And it speaks about this. Speaks about this. Even the subtle anatomy of a woman slightly different than the subtle anatomy of men. Even the rotation of the chakras are ignited. It's like man is clockwise, woman is counterclockwise. I say that people who go through sex gender forget transgender, right? You can change the sex at the face value of a physical appearance, right? And really appear as a woman. But you're not going to change your blueprint. You're not going to change your subtle anatomy. At the surface level, you can do anything. It's a makeup. Some makeup more invasive than another. Some makeup includes invasive, quite violent surgical procedures, which then have to be maintained by constant intake of very, very heavy hormones, so that the shape that one wants to have remains intact. Otherwise, the DNA will dictate, right? Will want to go back to the form that it was given at birth. Are you following me with this? But if we speak of the female anatomy and male anatomy, then this is a known phenomenon. This is a known fact. You see? So therefore, well, draw your own conclusions, therefore.
Thank you.
And whatever this may be taken personally by someone, some men may get offended, I don't care, quite frankly. It's like that part in me which sort of, some women maybe get offended also. I don't want to feel special. We're all equal. We fight for our rights. We want equal pay or equal respect. I don't care about this either. There's a lot of things I don't give a hoot about. But I only speak from the place which is dear to my heart and I feel relevant to relate. So this is what you need to know. When you ask me about this, feminine versus masculine, our society is certainly coming out of a very long, prolonged period of overly masculinized, militant culture. We're coming out of it. We're giving rebirth to ourselves. So the rise of the divine feminine is very much that process. It's the healing. Why? Because female body absorbs stress. It's not a light sentence. As someone said that the attitude towards women in a culture, it's the only telling factor of how evolved that culture.